Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Ukraine war news update. It's going to now be the first part for the 4th of July 2025. 4th of July, something happened on that day. Can't remember. 4th of July. 4th of July. Yeah, anyway. So we're going to start with the United States and the halting of the aid. That has been very much a concern to supporters of Ukraine as of late. So instead of sanctions against Russia, halting aid to Ukraine. So they've halted a whole bunch of different munitions particularly, but there is a range of stuff. We're still trying to get to the bottom of exactly what has happened there. Many people were up in arms, including here you can see Brian Fitzpatrick, who's a Republican very supportive of Ukraine, sending a letter to Trump demanding an emergency briefing on the suspension of that critically important military aid. Apparently the different departments were all in a bit of a flutter, as quite frankly it appears to have pretty much come from Elbridge Colby, who has been pulling the strings there, and the State Department I don't think were particularly aware, all sorts. Anyway, as Oz Katachis here says, Elbridge Colby's influence, put quite simply, will now mean that Russia will be able to kill more Ukrainian civilians than they would have otherwise been able to kill if Ukraine had this ammunition. So PAC-3 Patriots, 155mm artillery rounds, Gimlers, Stingers, AIM-7 and Hellfire missiles. I mean, some of that weaponry is not even relevant for the US anymore. I mean, AIM-7s and Hellfires, they just don't, and even Stingers, they don't particularly need them right now, but there you go. So the Pentagon has then come out and confirmed it's doing a capability review amid the pause in military aid deliveries to Ukraine. Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell confirmed on July the 2nd that some military assistance to Ukraine has been halted as the US Defense Department conducts a review of foreign aid deliveries. And in fact, what we've basically seen from Tammy Bruce for the State Department and Parnell for the Pentagon is that these spokespeople have come out and just expressed a whole bunch of word salad that really doesn't do anything to explain why the US has decided to pull aid, and it makes it look like it is indeed ideological and not for functional purposes, such as the US needs that kit and it's kind of America first. And it appears, I think the President Trump said something along the lines of, we're going to help get some aid to Ukraine, but America first. We're going to make sure, the idea is they're going to make sure they have the stockpiles. It's just irrelevant to at least some of the weaponry that has been put on hold. Colby Bubba says there's growing frustration with the Pentagon's actions on Capitol Hill. HASC, SASC, HFAC, SFRC should all be demanding immediate hearings on this. So these committees. Hegseth needs an answer as to why he's sitting on $5 billion in replacement funding if DoD stocks are so low that nothing can be spared for Ukraine. So these paltry amount of weapons being, comparative to the stockpiles that the US has, a paltry amount of weapons being stopped going to Ukraine. Obviously not paltry for Ukraine. Joe Wilson here says, following the president's tremendous success in achieving 5% defense spending for NATO allies and his insightful comments regarding air defense and future cooperation, I'm deeply concerned that the Department of Defense is undermining President Trump's peace through strength agenda and halting weapons transfers to Ukraine, including through other countries. As a senior member of the HASC Republicans, that's the House Armed Services Committee. Many of the listed systems are not currently in use by the US, and others are produced at a fraction of production capacity. I urge the Secretary of Defense to reverse the decision. Putin insults and mocks President Trump by refusing negotiations as he needlessly drags the world toward death and destruction. Absolutely unacceptable that this is happening. And it, as I say, it just seems ideological. And then when you hear this, and this is Malcolm Nance saying the Pentagon budget had a budget surplus, guess what Trump decided to do with it? So this just adds insult to injury. As President Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill moves on into the House, actually it's been voted for and it's got through, another budgetary outrage, little noted but quite substantial, is quietly playing out. It turns out that the Pentagon had removed some excess money from its account for the Sentinel, the new intercontinental ballistic missile, which had been experiencing enormous cost overruns. The money is left over from the budget passed last year, and the excess stems from a restructuring in the program brought on by a formal audit that the cost overruns triggered. This could have been good news if Trump had followed a different path. The surprise savings could have been refunded to the Treasury or rerouted to some other military program, say to fund more munitions for Ukraine, or to build stuff that, this is me talking now, to get some more munitions that they apparently think they're short of. Indeed, that's what it goes on to say, which is that the Defense Department has halted supposedly because of shortages of our own stockpiles. Or here's a novel idea: to fill some of the gaps caused by Trump's budget's drastic cuts in domestic programs. But no, the money, at least $400 million over the next few years, a Pentagon spokesman confirmed to me, will be spent on converting the luxury 747 passenger plane which a Qatari emir gave him as a gift this past May into the next variant of Air Force One, installing all the communications and other high-tech gear that will actually wind up costing closer to $1 billion. So in other words, budget excess in the DoD has been put towards not the incredibly important strategic goal of securing Ukraine's victory or helping them to move towards that end, or any other such thing. No, it's going to be spent on doing up a plane so that Trump can fly Bling Airways. Just absolutely insane, isn't it? Here we have Zelensky saying, we expect a mass shooting down of Shahids. Ukraine and the US signed a contract on the production of interceptor drones. I hope they are going to completely ramp up production of interceptor drones, because as I record this, Russia is sending a whole load of Shahids and potentially missiles into Kyiv, and I'm sure other places, in response to the phone call between Trump and Putin. I think it's pretty much time for that. So the Russians really hammering Kyiv, and they could do with lots of interceptors. Now, Ukraine and a US company are to co-produce hundreds of thousands of drones in 2025, according to Zelensky. Ukraine signed a major deal with a US company called Swiftbeat to co-produce various types of drones. Zelensky announced while he was in Denmark on a visit yesterday. So that is really good news, especially getting the US private entities involved. I think that's a good way into getting the US politically on side. Right, Sweden will provide Ukraine with a new military aid package worth $130 million. The package will include 10 barrels for Archer self-propelled howitzers, long-range drones, underwater vehicles, Scania and Volvo trucks. So that's good news. Thank you, Sweden. Excellent stuff. The Bild reports, citing government circles, that the German government, we hear, is trying to obtain approval for the US government for the procurement of 2 MIM-104 Patriot fire units, which Germany would finance for Ukraine. According to Bild information, the Ukrainian government had approached the German government with a request because they could not make any progress in the US themselves. And apparently, they are yet to hear anything from Pete Hegseth. This is a couple of weeks old. I mean, the US do not want to sell stuff, even to Europe, to get to Ukraine. They're just not interested. Absolutely incredible. We hear that Latvia is to deliver 42 Patrias 6x6 armoured personnel carriers to Ukraine. Spare parts, ammunition and other weapons will be part of that package too. So that's fantastic. I mean, they'll definitely find those very, very helpful. Yeah. Someone says this is not the last thing. We produce more than 42 per half year. So soon enough, another 42 and another, as long as it takes. So, well, I'd like to think that would be the case because actually, without the US, they are going to need lots of these. So the US were providing strikers. They were super useful, but they're not going to be getting those. I doubt. I don't know if there are any left on USAI or more likely PDA orders and whatnot. But yeah, they need stuff like this because they don't produce the heavier equipment themselves. The Ukrainians, there's no tanks, no infantry fighting vehicle production. Even APCs, it's more infantry mobility vehicles, MRAPs at the most. Germany requested, so that's what I was going to say. Yeah, several weeks ago they requested those systems from the US, according to the Bilt. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth still hasn't responded. It's an absolute shocker, isn't it? And Ukraine's new M1 Abrams tanks are ready, but their brigade might not be. Ukraine is getting 49 of these from Australia. It risks wasting them, says the Euromaidan press. So 9 months after Australia pledged not 49 surplus M1A1 Abrams tanks to the Ukrainian war effort, the 69-ton combat vehicles are finally about to reach Ukraine. A photo that circulated online on Friday depicts one of the heavily armed tanks in Poland, presumably awaiting onward shipment to Ukraine. I don't know if that photo is here. No, it's not. But yeah, it was doing the rounds. Ukrainian President Zelensky celebrated the Abrams' imminent arrival way back on the 18th of May. I'm grateful for Australia's comprehensive support for the Abrams tanks that are helping our warriors defend Ukraine, Zelensky said in a meeting in Rome with Australian Prime Minister then. Ukrainian troops surely welcome the fresh tanks, even as heavy armoured vehicles play a smaller and smaller role along the drone-patrolled, mine-infested front line. But the brigade the US-made tanks are likeliest to join the 47th Mechanised Brigade was recently in the throes of a leadership crisis, citing clueless leaders ordering troops to execute stupid tasks. One of the brigade's battalion commanders, Alexander Strishin, practically begged for his chain of command to relieve him of duty in a 16th of May post on social media. It's unclear what, if anything, resulted from his protest, but the turmoil in and around the 47th Mechanised Brigade risks wasting precious tanks the Ukrainians have been waiting a long time for. It's possible, however, that the Ukrainian army will distribute the newly arrived M1s across more units than just the 47th Mechanised. Pat Conroy, Australia's Defence Industry Minister, announced the donation in October. The four-person M1A1s equipped with Australian Army's Armoured Brigade until the brigade upgraded to newer M1A2s last year. The older tanks are still in reasonably good working order. That's a quote from JC Dodson, a Ukraine-based defence consultant who helped negotiate the tank transfer. He told the ABC that Ukrainian officials have asked for the old Abrams in 2023, but the Australians waited until their new Abrams arrived before pledging the excess tanks. The US government holds the export license for the M1s, which were made in Ohio, and the Russia-friendly administration of Trump waited to sign off on the deal, adding further delay. In any event, it seems at least some of the tanks are finally on the last legs of their long journeys to Ukraine. It's apparent that the Ukrainian army will do with the ex-Australian Abrams is first, it will up-armour them with reactive armour and anti-drone cages and radio jammers, and then it will probably assign at least some of them to the 47th, the only Ukrainian unit with the experience on the M1. The 47th Mechanised Brigade got all 31 of the surplus M1A1s the United States pledged to Ukraine in 2023. In 18 months of hard fighting, the brigade has lost at least 12 of the original M1s, 10 destroyed, 1 captured, and 1 so badly damaged it wound up as a museum piece in Ukraine. Other M1s have been damaged, and at least a few were probably write-offs. The 47th Mechanised Brigade may be down to half its original tank strength. The 49 Australian M1s are enough to restore the brigade's tank strength while also equipping a second battalion in another brigade or in one of the new multi-brigade corps the Ukrainian army is standing up. The same sweeping reorganization that's introducing the army to core operations is also reducing or even eliminating Ukraine's 4 separate tank brigades, each with 100 tanks in favour of smaller but more numerous separate tank battalions with just 31 tanks apiece. In the meantime, it's apparent that some brigades are making do with just a single tank company or a dozen or so tanks. That seems to be the plan for Ukraine's growing fleet of German-made Leopard 1A5s. Ukrainian officials clearly appreciate that tiny explosive drones and not 69-ton tanks are now the dominant weapons along the front line. So on and so forth. But, tanks still do play a role. Feel free to go and finish off that article at your leisure. Zelensky said, "We are preparing very carefully for new negotiations in Europe regarding drones. There will be more of our own production. Today we discussed everything related to orders, contracts and the full capabilities of our production." That was as he met with, I think that was in that's before we went to Denmark. So yeah, that's he says, "I will talk to our partners about new investments in Ukraine in our weapons. The priority is drones, interceptor drones, definitely interceptor drones, and drones for long range strikes." I should actually have had that later in my little Ukraine section. However, I didn't. So today in Denmark, so he was in Denmark, actually yesterday now, Ukrainian Defense Minister signed a memorandum with Swiftbeat CEO Eric Schmidt to scale up drone production for Ukraine. That's what we heard already with regards to, that's the American company. But also they signed a joint venture to manufacture and supply Ukrainian designed drones in Britain. So that's really good news. So the British defence company Prevail Partners and the Ukrainian Skyton have announced the creation of a joint venture company located in the UK. The joint venture will produce Skyton's Raybird series of drones, I don't know them, in the UK, not only for use with the Ukrainian armed forces, but also for potential export deals to NATO countries. So that's Skyton Raybird. Skyton Raybird. Let's have a little look at that. Raybird drones. Yeah, so they do look to be catapult launched. Yeah, that's the size of them. Long range surveillance drone. Yeah, so it looks like that is a unmanned aircraft systems. Best in class drone into UK military applications. Effective amidst the onset of the war. Yeah, but I don't know too much about them. Skyton says its Raybird drone has over 350,000 flight hours and is responsible for billions of dollars in Russian losses. So obviously does a good job at spotting targets then. Anyway, so that's a co-production between the UK and Ukraine, and we're seeing a lot more of that. That's happening in a number of different countries, Denmark included. Belgium and Turkey officially joined the International Drone Coalition created to support Ukraine, so that's good news. Another couple of countries there. Of course, these drone or these capability coalitions across these different domains are really useful for the partner countries. As I keep saying, there's no such thing as a free lunch. We give this help to Ukraine because it's in our strategic interest to do so. So, we get the return on investment strategically and politically, but also in terms of that feedback loop of what's needed in the modern battlefield arena. And we help to provide that to Ukraine and therefore get the latest information back and expertise in building these things so that we can build them for our own armed forces and provide our own armed forces the very best that we can, because we're getting all that information, all that feedback from Ukraine. Now, Taurus missiles for Ukraine remain on the table, according to German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. He has said that there's no agreement reached between himself and Zelensky as of yet, but he also said the months-long training has not even started. But he has said it's still on the table, so I guess that's good news. I don't know, it's looking unlikely, isn't it? Now, Emmanuel Macron had a right old rant well, no, not really, but he very forcefully putting his point across, which has been the French position for an awful long time. Why the hell are we spending all this money outside of Europe when we should be spending money on European defence industries? And he's absolutely right. He said, we've gone mad. Macron slams Europe's defence hypocrisy. He didn't hold back. Quote, we Europeans spent 75% of our defence budget since the war in Ukraine began on non-European solutions. We bought expensive American and South Korean weapons. We have 1.5 billion euros in the EDIP programme for 27 countries for 2 years, and yet we're holding epic debates about limiting non-European arms to 35%, 40% or 50%. We've gone mad. So he really wants, and probably because, or almost certainly because, France is the second biggest military exporter in the world. So, if you're going to buy European, you're generally going to dip into the French military industrial complex to some degree. But he's got a point, that you need independence. I was seeing a thread by Thomas Tyner about, HIMARS, and there are no, if HIMARS or if the weapons manufacturers aren't producing those missiles for the HIMARS, in a localized manner in Europe, then that's an issue. So, do you get the Israeli version, the PULS, the PULS? But then, they're not going to set up manufacturing in Europe either, unless you are buying an absolute ton of these things and a ton of these missiles. Same with South Korea. So, what do you do? Well, really, you need to build stuff in Europe yourself. So, I mean, the two options are you build your own from scratch, or actually Rheinmetall. So, on the HIMARS front, I don't know if Thomas Tyner just missed this, but Rheinmetall are producing, I think, ATACMS and missiles for the HIMARS, the M140, whatever. They are planning to do that. So, you either build your own stuff from scratch, or you get foreign entities like Lockheed Martin to set up in Europe and build that stuff in Europe. So, yes, it's either a multinational or an American company in this case. But the manufacturing is taking place in Europe. It is jobs in Europe. A lot of that tax money stays in Europe, so on and so forth. So, yeah, those are the options. But certainly there is recourse for Macron to be ranting about getting Europe to spend much more money in Europe. And the EU will allocate 76 million euros for the construction of a Euro rail from Lviv to the border with Poland, which should significantly reduce travel time abroad. Right, this is brilliant, and it should definitely be happening. Ukraine operates on a Soviet gauge railway network, which means that if you want to get a train from Krakow, Warsaw to Lviv or to Kyiv, you have to stop at the border and change train, because the European gauge, doesn't go into Ukraine. So it stops, you go to somewhere like Helm in Poland, and then you jump onto a different train that operates on a Soviet gauge, and then you get that into Ukraine. So here it's about making a European gauge railway go all the way to Lviv, so that you don't have to switch trains. It's much more efficient and quicker, and etc., etc. I think that's good news. Now, although this has nothing to do with Ukraine particularly, it is, I think, interesting. It could, I don't know, it's probably a little bit too far off to affect Ukraine. But breaking news that Peru has decided to buy 24 Jazz 39 Gripen E or F fighter jets from Sweden for $3.5 billion instead of F-16s from the US or Rafale from France. They will replace Peru's aging fleet of MiG-29s and Mirage 2000s, both planes that Ukraine could really do with. Now, if you're going to put an order in for Gripens now, you're not going to see those for some time. So it's not like Peru is suddenly going to have a whole bunch of planes they can get to Ukraine. But I'll tell you what, Mirage 2000s and MiG-29s are both useful planes that the Ukrainians would love to get their hands on. Colombia is likely also going to buy around 20 Gripens in a few weeks. That's really substantial, and good news for Saab, good news for Europe. And actually, I'd like to see Ukrainians have the Gripen, and the more other countries had Gripen, the more the kind of the maintenance and logistics, I guess the supply chains are, the more those cogs are greased, and the easier it will be to get like spare parts and so on and so forth. I think this is good news in general. Right, on to a couple of Ukrainian bits here. Zelensky said I've already talked you through that. So on to the next one then. Ukrainian engineers have developed a domestic counterpart to the American loitering munition, this Switchblade 600. So the Switchblade 600 is kind of launched from a mini mortar that you carry around with you. The Ukrainian company Reactive Drone has created the Pop-Fly loitering munition, which is currently undergoing testing. Pop-Fly will be available in both strike and reconnaissance variants. It will carry a payload of 2.5 to 5 kilograms and have a range of 50 to 100 kilometers, depending on the type of warhead used. Like the Switchblade 600, the Pop-Fly will be launched from a dedicated container, simplifying deployment and operation. So basically, these wings, I presume, will fold back. And you can launch it out of some kind of tube, like a mortar bomb, and the wings pop out and it flies off to go and do your bidding. Right, a Ukrainian company called UA Damage has developed a machine learning drone that uses 4 different sensors to detect landmines with day and infrared cameras, a magnometer, and a ground penetrating radar in development. It's up to 10,000 square meters, can be surveyed in a day. That's brilliant news. The system is trained with machine learning algorithms to automatically detect explosive objects by analyzing magnetic field maps combined with the use of a magnetometer. I think I said magnometer earlier. Magnetometer. The flash drive is removed after each flight and inserted in a computer. The sensor data is then fused into a single map of the surveyed area. So that's going to be very useful for the sheer scope of demining that will need to be done as the war continues, but also after the war hopefully ends. Okay, so now we're on to Russian bits and pieces. So Russia has already transferred Shahid drone production technology and ready-to-use Pantsir S-1 air defense systems to North Korea, says Ukraine's intelligence chief Kirilo Budnov. That's important because it goes against UN resolutions and sanctions and whatnot. So that they are flagrantly breaking the rules, the Russians, and they appear not to care one iota because the world appears to be unable to do anything about them breaking the rules. Kharkiv was attacked for the first time with a drone called the Chernika. According to Defense Express, the Chernika 1 drone of the flying wing type is made of foam plastic. Its range is up to 80 kilometers, cruising speed is 75 kilometers an hour, and the maximum flight altitude is up to 1.5 kilometers. The Chernika 2 is a larger version of the drone. It's a warhead weighing up to 3.5 kilograms and flies up to 100 kilometers. So with these foam wings, of course, they are not going to be picked up so easily by a radar. Drones hit a Russian weapons factory in Lipetsk Oblast last night, or 2 nights ago now. The governor says drones reportedly struck a factory in Russia's Lipetsk Oblast that produces parts for drones and missiles. And the Russian military-industrial complex is getting struck an awful lot at the moment. Some are saying, I was speaking to Caelan Robertson just within the last day, and he said that he feels that now the US seems to have really ditched Ukraine, halting weapon supplies and whatnot. Ukraine might feel that they are unshackled, and you might see them go to town on striking oil depots and the energy infrastructure. but also just striking more generally across Russia. There is this idea that, well, big claim with a lot of justification, that the US had formally asked Ukraine not to do deep drone strikes into Russia because Russia had asked the US to stop them doing that. And indeed, Lukashenko, the Belarusian dictator, had asked Keith Kellogg to, get the Ukrainians to tone down their drone attacks, because otherwise there won't be a ceasefire forthcoming. So I think there has been pressure from the United States on Ukraine to stop doing so many strikes. I think if Ukraine feel like the US is just not doing anything to help them at all, and after having done everything that the US has asked them, where Russia has done nothing, I think Ukraine would be absolutely justified in going crazy at Russia. And indeed, we are starting to see Storm Shadow missiles be used again. I don't know whether these are existing stockpiles or whether the UK and or France and Italy have provided more of the Storm Shadows or Scout PGs to the Ukrainians recently. Russian media report that as a result of the attack on the Kupol plant in Izhevsk, 4 drone production workshops were damaged at once, and these workshops operated around the clock, assembling finished drones. Processing metals and soldering microchips. Of fire and roof collapse were recorded, and apparently they have, I think, closed down production there at the moment, if I'm right in saying. So that'd be really good news. You want to hit as many of these manufacturing facilities as humanly possible. Right, that's enough from me. I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much for watching. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. It really does help me get towards that magic 100,000, because my son really wants to cast his eyes on one of those plaques that you can get. That's the only reason. So if you can subscribe, that'd be really cool. Anyway, take care. Speak to you soon.